Good morning, Liz.
Good
How-
morning.
How's it going today?
Good. How are you?
Hey, not too bad. I got some tea going.
I have
I had a couple cups of coffee this morning, but on to tea now.
I've switched to decaf, but still rocking the coffee. So
Okay, right on. There we go. So we are at July 15th now. Hard to believe. Summer is kind of like halfway over. Uh,
no.
it's going by really fast. I mean, I know for you with three kids at home, they're probably not ready to go back to school yet, but we're moving in that direction.
I know they saw the back to school flyers from Target and they're like, no. So
Oh, funny.
if you have kids and you're thinking about that back to school, I mean, pair that back to school with back to a job. If you're looking at securing work for the fall after things settle down and your kids are back in school, now's the time to be really starting your job search because it's going to take you a while. I mean, it just is. Even though it's a job seekers market right now, it can take a little while to find the right fit for you. So it's a good
Yeah,
time to dip the toe in.
yeah, absolutely. And let's talk a little bit about what's going on in our local job market here. I mean, we have 400, I think, and it's 434 jobs on Corridor Careers right now. So
Hmm.
there's a plethora of jobs out there. Tons of employers looking to hire. It is a job seekers market, and I've noticed a couple other things going on throughout this whole, stay at work from home pandemic thing. And I've actually had a couple friends that were working locally, and they have now transitioned and started working for companies 100% remotely, but the companies are based in other states.
Hmm.
So I think we what I'm seeing is we have a very talented workforce here in Eastern Iowa. People, employers from other areas are recognizing that,
Hmm.
and sure enough, like they're dipping in and I don't want to say stealing, but they're finding opportunity in our market, which is creating even more job opportunities for local candidates.
Right, because those jobs still exist that your friends were working at right here in the market. So if you are tired of working from home and want to get back into some kind of semblance of a normal where you're visiting a workplace at least every once in a while, you're going to want to work locally somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well we're going to do something kind of unique here. We're going to talk about transferable skills, or just we're gonna take a look at a job that's on Corridor Careers right now, and we're gonna just kind of go over the bullet points of it and talk about what are some of the skills that might be needed for a job, for this job. So do you have that job, Liz, that we're going to
Yeah.
look at?
So we're going to talk about our friends at MediRev here. MediRev is a local company in Coralville, and they are a longtime partner of Corridor Careers, posting their jobs, attending our career fairs usually. And so this administrative coordinator, I just thought was a good example of, you know, help you understand, okay, why are skills in a resume important? And I just know this because I recently hired someone, and reviewing the skills that usually are at the top of a resume, like after you've given your kind of spiel of who you are and what your objective is, sometimes there'll be like a skills summary at the top that is extremely useful to a hiring manager who is pouring through various resumes, trying to determine like, who should I interview? And so, you know, you might think to yourself, well, what do I put in there? I mean, I have lots of skills, but what are ones that are relevant to an employer? And the employer will tell you what skills are relevant to them. So you can generally just read through the job description and try to highlight things that would pop out like as a keyword. So for instance, this role of an administrative coordinator, they're looking for someone who has experience with setting appointments. And so calendar setting appointments is a skill that you could put as a skill in your skill summary. They're also looking for someone who is good on the phone, has good communication skills. So I would highlight those.
The organization.
Coordination skills, yeah, like they mentioned coordinate like many, many times in this. So that should clue you like, okay, coordination is really important. Obviously, it's in the job title, but I should include that as a keyword in my skills maybe because it'll help you stand out. And then they even have like a knowledge, skills, and abilities section, with some job descriptions do not have. They just don't have this, but these guys do. And so you can see here they're looking for experience. So you'll want to make sure that if you have work history that includes 2 to 3 years of prior experience, that you're kind of bringing that to the top of your resume. You know, your job history doesn't necessarily have to be chronological. It's helpful sometimes if it is, especially like what are you currently doing? But if what you're currently doing is not relevant to the job that you're seeking, it's okay for you to kind of highlight the jobs that are, so that you can show that you have the experience that they're looking for. And then they specifically call out Microsoft Office Suite products. So I would just mirror their wording on this. You could say Microsoft Excel as a skill, or Microsoft Office or Office 365 as a skill set. They're going to recognize that that is what they're talking about. And then interpersonal skills and communication skills. Pleasant phone manner is a good one that I've seen. Like that's, I always see that and it kind of strikes me like, okay, they're aware of how they are on the phone and they're promising that they have a good phone manner. And so those are key things that you might want to include in that skills section just for this type of job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw a lot of attention to detail, obviously,
Yeah.
you know, being able to stay organized, stay on task, be friendly, like you said, pleasant phone manner, all looked like things that MediRev is looking for in that admin coordinator position.
And what employer wouldn't be looking for those skills? I mean, those are just kind of universal skills, right? And they're sometimes called soft skills. And soft skills can be a little bit confusing to job seekers, I think, of like, what is a soft skill? Because there are things that you might not necessarily recognize about yourself and think worthy of putting in a resume. Like if you're friendly, like why would I put friendly in a resume? It's not a skill. Well, it is a skill, you know, like being pleasant and having a good attitude. I've seen that in resumes sometimes too. And it's like, oh, cool. They're recognizing that that's an important thing to know how to do. And they've put it in their resume, and it makes me feel good as a hiring manager. Like, okay, well, they state that they have a good attitude. We'll see in the interview if they actually do, but at least they are recognizing that that is something that's important to employers.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think it was just pre-pandemic, actually. So I'm thinking like early last year, Gary Vaynerchuk, he did a presentation, and he was talking about the most valuable skills that are needed in the workforce now. And his number one thing was emotional intelligence, is what he referred to it as. But that's basically the same as saying you have to have a good personality, right? Like you can't be Debbie Downer at the office and expect to get a job. Like you have to, you know, be positive, have a good attitude, right? And you know, you basically in the office are going to get treated how you treat other people, right? So you know, if you show up and have a good attitude at work and are smiling, you're probably going to get that same thing back from your fellow coworkers, and you're going to be, and especially during the interview process, have a better chance of getting the job.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's always going to be bad days, right? You're always going to have a bad day occasionally, and that's okay. But especially in that interview process, that's really your opportunity to showcase your best day.
Have a good day that
This is Liz at her best, okay? Because, you know, the interview, it's tough. Like, as a hiring manager, I always want to give the other, the candidate the benefit of the doubt, especially because I know they're putting themselves out there. But not every hiring manager has the same attitude that I have. And really, you're going to be your best if you just kind of prep yourself up. So let's just say you got to have that, like, what do you call it? You gotta have that pep talk beforehand, you know, that locker room talk with yourself before you get into the interview. And that interview is probably going to take place over something like this, right? Like it's probably going to be a Zoom. So check your background, you know, make sure you got a clean shirt on and, you know, get yourself ready, practice. You know, like if you're going to do a Zoom interview and you've never done one before, call your friend on Facebook portal or something like that, or, you know, do a FaceTime with somebody and just say, hey, I just want to practice how I look when I'm on a screen. And, they can give you some tips and help you understand, hey, you're always slouching, or, you got some weird thing behind you that you're not even aware of.
That's a
Those things
really
can
good point.
just, they're just going to get in your way, and they have nothing to do with your skills as a person, as a worker, but they're just those things because we're not professional job seekers, we forget about.
Mhm. Yeah, I can even tell, like looking at you right now through our Zoom meeting, you're sitting, upright and attentive.
Hmm.
I kind of have my arms folded in front of me, but as a job seeker, like if I was like this,
Right.
sitting back in my chair, like it just, it gives a different feeling. So, good things to pay attention to.
Yeah, and check out our YouTube, because I do link to a couple of playlists for like Zoom interview tips, things like that. One of the things is they recommend getting a sticky note and putting your top points that you want to get through in your interview, and then sticking it on the screen so that you look at that instead of like yourself. Because like right now I'm looking at myself, or
Easy to
or
do.
if you got to remind yourself, hey, look at the camera, because that's giving eye contact to the other person, which is really, it's like kind of an actor tip, because none of us,
Right.
I mean, most of us are not actors and not used to looking in a camera. So those things. So there's some great resources on YouTube about how to kind of trick yourself into doing the right thing in a Zoom interview. But I wouldn't get so caught up in that. Like if you're just a human being, and you like kind of pay attention to like, okay, if I was going to meet with somebody in person, this is how I would look. This is how I'd present myself, and kind of just kind of have that same attitude over Zoom. I think you'd be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that was really good, Liz. Lots of little nuggets in there. I really like that. Any parting words before we sign off for this edition of Careers in Coffee?
No, I think for the next few editions of Careers in Coffee, we're just going to hammer home some of the basics, because, it's just so easy to lose those basics of like, oh yeah, this is how resume works, and oh yeah, this is how interview tip. This is some interview tips. So we're trying to cover some of those things in the coming ones. Get you guys ready to interview, to get that job before fall, because we really want to see you, living your best life by November, right?
There we go. I like it. All right, Liz. Thanks a lot. Until next time.
Peace out. Drink more coffee.